The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
It's that time of year when things are happening and like DNA is closing cases and trials are going on. And I've collected a bunch of stories that I'm going to put into some of the episodes that we're doing between now and sort of the end of the year. But like, for the most part, I think it's safe to say we're focused then on like holiday episodes and doing that. We have a series that's coming out in a week or so that'll last us into November. But there were a couple of things that I wanted to talk about now. One I was going to actually incorporate into the end of our holiday episodes. And I say that because typically we do kind of a theme. It didn't really fit though. And then I thought about making it the very last one. But we're going to talk about that today. But there was at least like one update that happened in another case, maybe two. And I thought I would bring those up today along with one of those interesting stories. So the first thing I wanted to throw out there is that a case we covered this time last year, Robert Robertson down in Texas, he was scheduled to be executed 24 hours ago. And that got blocked.
Again?
Yeah, it got blocked. He was back on to be executed. But finally, the Republican Court of Criminal Appeals, who had denied his most recent appeal 5-4, they granted his request for a stay under a 2013 law called the Junk Science Law in Texas. So that
was literally deja vu.
Yeah, like it was happening in the background. I pulled up the Texas Tribune on October 9th. A woman named Kyla Guo, she wrote Texas court blocks execution of death row inmate Robert Robertson in the Texas Tribune. And it just says Texas's highest criminal court on Thursday blocked Robert Robertson's execution a week before it was set to take place, sending his case back to the trial court. So that, this article is October 9th. She puts it out 9 o'clock in the morning. It says Robertson's convicted of capital murder in 2003 for the death of his 2-year-old daughter, Nikki, who was diagnosed with shaken baby syndrome. He's maintained his innocence for over more than 20 years on death row, with his attorneys arguing that the science behind Nikki's shaken baby diagnosis is no longer holding up. He was scheduled to be executed October 16th, which would have made him the first person in U.S. history put to death in a shaken baby syndrome case. After previously denying his recent appeals, largely on procedural grounds, a 5-4 majority of the all-Republican Court of Criminal Appeals granted Robertson's request for a stay of execution under Texas's groundbreaking 2013 Junk Science Law, which provides for a second look when the science driving a conviction has since been debunked. The law has never been successfully used to secure a new trial for a death row inmate, though Robinson could be the first if the trial court in Anderson County recommends that the evidence warrants one, and the High Court agrees. In its order, the Court of Criminal Appeals cites its decision last year to overturn the shaken baby conviction of Dallas County man Andrew Rourke, based on the evolving medical research on shaken baby diagnoses, which, for those of you who don't know, turns out shaken baby diagnoses are largely bunk when they are not backed up by other instances of neglect or abuse. That's the nutshell. If there's not something else happening and it comes kind of out of nowhere and someone has done all the right things, which is the case here, like the way they like get involved in his life is he keeps taking the baby to the doctor.
Right, and she was like so much older
than a typical SIDS baby or shaken baby.
Because, and I remember because there's a picture, I believe, that I saw of him holding his daughter that died, and I was like thinking about the effort it would take to cause the injury that supposed shaken baby syndrome indicates. It's a brain injury where the brain moves, right?
Yeah.
And it kills them essentially because of like the brain injury. But I was like,
essentially creating a TBI in a very small child who can't heal from it.
Right. And they die. Their body, their brain is not able to tell their body, to keep functioning, and they shut down and they die. And so I was like, that kid's too big to have been shaken.
Mostly, yeah.
And it's such I hate to say this. I didn't realize this was going on. This did happen like almost exactly last year. Right?
Yeah, time-wise.
And they did not stay the execution until like, I think the day of, maybe the day before.
Last time, you mean?
Yeah, last time.
Yeah, that was the whole reason it called our attention to begin with was...
and that was so close. And I go, oh my goodness, we are actually, like, they're going to put to death an innocent father. Right?
Yeah. I mean, he's already done 20 years on death row. But ultimately, what kind of changed the tide and caught our attention, I think, is that experts found that this little girl, who was, as you said, a little bit older than the typical shaken baby victim, they found that Nikki is her name, that she had undiagnosed chronic pneumonia and that she had been prescribed medications that today in 2025 would never be given to a toddler her age. Those medications had suppressed her breathing, and by having her breathing suppressed, her respiratory system suppressed, her circulatory system kind of went into overload. That led to her brain swelling. This condition caused sepsis, and it caused a bleeding disorder that made the bruises that could be seen on her, it sort of exacerbated them. And so her body was bruising more easily as her brain is swelling. And none of this was identified because from the very beginning with the emergency department, everybody was kind of like looking for Robert Robertson to have done something abusive and to have caused the death of his child. But it was delayed last year. He gets subpoenaed the day before he's set to be put to death. And the subpoena starts this huge political clash down in Texas. The Texas Supreme Court stepped in, and they temporarily delayed the execution. Then lawmakers had argued the courts were not appropriately applying the junk science law. And for the lawyers involved, they had repeatedly tried to use the 2013 ruling, so that's going back 12 years, about junk science, the new law, to overturn this conviction. And there's been bills presented to bolster the junk science law and to like further allow it to be used in cases like this. It passed the House in Texas, but it died in the Senate.
Well, junk science is in and of itself an oxymoron.
Correct. These are not like, they're not real scientific measures that are being used that are causing this.
In this case, I recall the pediatrician who initially, I don't know if he testified at Robert Robertson's trial or if he was just the person who coined it as shaken baby syndrome. He was like, this was not my intent when I said this. He said there can be cases where a baby can be shaken in anger, in desperation. And I'm talking about a baby, like a little baby. And it can cause the movement in the brain. But he was like, the pediatrician who had previously testified about it, he said himself, if I had known it was going to get to this point, I never even would have posited that because it's not what he was going for. And, junk science, it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of things, right? I mean, in that science is supposed to not be junk, right?
Yeah.
It's the opposition of junk, and it's supposed to be this kind of controlled and recreatable methodology. And I think that it gets blown so far out of a proportion in the court setting because it's an easy out, right?
Yeah.
In this particular case with the shaken baby syndrome. It's really sad that things that could possibly have a very tiny piece of scientific pie, they end up ultimately being junk science because they're overused.
Well, so they have other problems down there related to this case. They have this one Court of Criminal Appeals judge named Gina Parker. She wrote a dissenting opinion, and I have no idea how she ended up becoming a criminal Court of Appeals judge. But Texas, if you're listening, she's out of Waco. Her name is Gina Parker. You need to vote her out. You need to realize that you have a very, very serious problem with her. I have never read a more delusional dissent, and I have read some delusional dissents, but she states Robert Robertson's case was not a shaken baby case. She says the trial testimony made it clear from the injuries that the obvious conclusion and the only conclusion to draw was that the child was beaten to death, which makes me think that I briefly read her bio and I thought she was the worst prosecutor ever because the interpretation that she has of what she's reading, like even on a Dr. Seuss level, she is not reading what's being put down there. She certainly did not read through the orders and the motions in that case. That case is complex when it comes to how much litigation has gone into it. She does not seem to understand the law of her own state. And I will say this, Texas, their criminal justice system is an absolute disaster. They're trying, they just cannot keep up with themselves. And it has caused them problems over the years. They have executed some of the only innocent people that are now documented to be innocent. And this would have been another case like that. It does not seem they learned. They also have another rep there named Mitch Little out of Louisville. He said he was disappointed and dismayed in the 5 judges on our Court of Criminal Appeals that they could read the trial court's record and extend relief. I fully expect his conviction to be upheld in the trial court based on the evidentiary record and put us right back where we started. He is a vocal proponent of preserving Robert Robertson's death sentence. Guys, if you're in Texas, you need to vote him out. Like these two, I'm being as nice as I can right now. You don't want them in charge of anything.
I'd really like to know that, essentially, a big part of that case was that he was taking her to the doctor. He was trying to get that child help.
Yep.
And that completely undermines any notion that he beat that child to death.
Right.
People who beat children don't take them to the doctors most of the time, right?
Right.
But I remember reading that part of it, and that wasn't the only thing that contradicted the outcome.
No. That's the thing. That's the thing. I'm bringing up these two people because that's what they took away from this. There was an Anderson County judge that was ordered in 2016 to take a further review of this case, which is how we get to where we are. That trial court also was not paying attention. And when I say was not paying attention, I don't, Meg calls it headline skimming, so that's what I'm going to use. You cannot be a jurist in the state of Texas and be a headline skimmer. So if you don't know how to read and you're relying on your law school 2L, 3L interns to provide you synopses of these cases, meaning you've literally given a 22 or 23-year-old kid who has never practiced the law the duty of summarizing, in this case, thousands of pages. And both of them will argue with me and tell me that they read it. And I can tell you right now, Mitch Little didn't read a word of it. I know that. And I can tell you that the clerk of criminal appeals judge, Gina Parker, She had an intern read this, a clerk summarize the intern, and then she read the summary of the synopsis of the summary. If they execute this man, I promise you, they executed yet another innocent person in Texas. And stuff like that bothers me because there's so many other things to be done here. They should have commuted the sentence a long time ago and gotten him off of death row. And at this point, we should not even be talking about his guilt, let alone his execution.
I agree. And you say that, like, I mean, Texas's justice system is a mess, and you're right. And it's not the only state that's a mess, but I'm starting to see this trend where, as opposed to like people tackling it head on, they're literally going through the motion and they don't care. And then, like, people who could have possibly maybe done something someday, they just give up. They're not really interested in the fight.
Yeah.
So that's concerning to me, but I do realize that, like, this isn't the first time in history that's happened. But at the same time,
it's not even the first time in history in Texas that's happened.
The blinders are so wide.
Yeah, one of the reasons I get up on my high horse about Texas is I have watched them violate the own statutes they fought for some reason. They have these statutes that their attorney general's office and then their district attorney's offices and their own agencies, including the Rangers, who everybody at one point held in a very high regard, pay no attention to. So if you're not following the law, how do you think you're enforcing it? And if you need a notable example of this, I would just point everybody to the work of Gerald Hurst. You can make your own opinion from what's happening there. And that's related to the execution in 2004 of Cameron Todd Willingham. If you read the Cameron Todd Willingham case, knowing what science is now, and you can go compare it, because there are acceptable forms of the same science that have modified the flawed techniques that were used in the first place that point to Texas executing an absolutely innocent man who lost his children in a fire, then you'll get a better understanding and you can come to your own conclusion about the state of Texas and the criminal justice system. And I could rant about this all day. I just wanted to point out that here we are again with another stay for Robert Robertson. And that's not I don't know him. I don't have a personal opinion of him. I don't know if he's a good person or a bad person or whatever. I just know, based on everything that I've seen, he was simply taking his kid to the doctor. And here we are.
Right. And it, as harrowing as my very distant experience with that situation was, because it was happening in real time. We did an episode on how this was scheduled. This was bad. We weren't sure anybody was going to do anything. And I watched the clock kind of tick down on it. And it was last second. And to see that it happened again.
Yeah.
That's insane. Yep. It's insanity. This is not judicial efficiency. It is very wasteful.
Yeah, it's incredibly wasteful of the resources. The biggest problem, though, is you're talking about human lives. And the way that this is happening is to simplify it for people. When the state executes an innocent person, you have an untouchable entity operating with absolute impunity, committing murder, which is the whole reason they're executing the person in the first place, is because they allege that that person has committed murder.
It's really a disaster, kind of unmitigated disaster.
Right. And we've gotten ourselves into this position where politicians get into office, they elect themselves into certain positions, they insulate those positions, they insulate the agencies around them. It is impossible to sue the police in Texas. It is 1,000% impossible. And somebody's going to send me the one link where one person got a settlement out of something. But I will say that they didn't let it be adjudicated. But they sure as hell put this guy on death row for killing his daughter 20 years ago. And here we are. There's something wrong with the system there. This is a rant that I would do all day long, and I apologize for doing that.
You have some good points, though. What the one justice that sort of switched and said, "Wait, this isn't shaken baby syndrome. That doesn't apply. That's a weird turnabout face at this point."
Yeah, that's why I'm saying they didn't read it, because
I hope not.
The reason I get on my high horse about a court of criminal appeals judge doing that is I'm all for reviewing cases de novo from scratch when you get them on your desk. I'm not for a complete reinterpretation of the evidence in a way that, you're now telling me you don't believe the experts, you don't believe the jury, but we should kill him anyways. That makes you an individual executioner.
It's not good sound logic. It really isn't. And it's disappointing.
Right.
Because in that case, for any argument you have, they will have a counter argument
full of logical fallacies.
Yep. Exactly. And that's alarming. It really is. It's very alarming.
Yeah, and it's terrible that we have legislators involved there. But if you need to know who to vote for, honestly, this is the type of if you're a one issue person, this is the type of one issue that you can look at and you can go, whoever in the legislature is supporting executing this man, you don't want them to be your lawmaker, because that could be you.
It absolutely could be. And I can't see, we've had this come up several times about the death penalty, and I used to be all for it. Now I'm I don't know. More research needs to be done, TBD, about my opinion of it, right? Because it is a thing in some states. It happens. I'm so far removed from it in most cases that it doesn't matter what I think about it anyway. Robert Robertson, he got me really close to anticipating an innocent man being killed by a state. That was harrowing, because it wasn't something that had happened. It was something that was happening, right?
Yeah.
And I will say this, though. If I were the person who had to sign a death warrant, I would absolutely not do it. So it's not that I don't believe in the death penalty. It's just I don't trust the system.
I've seen, I'm with you. I've seen cases, even recently, I have seen executions that, I'm not going to say that I would be the one to sign a death warrant on them. I will say I don't think the process missed by much.
Well, sure. And I've seen cases like that too. And, for cases like that, great. For ones that aren't like that, that is 10 times worse than the one that was great, right?
Yeah.
And then who decides, right?
Well, that's where I get hung up on. I don't think I believe in the death penalty, because I would be personally perfectly okay for the people that have recently been executed for some heinous actions to be held in a tiny cage for the rest of their life. And it's very few people I feel like even that is an inappropriate punishment. I can look at people as humans and find their bad days. And I can go through and find mitigating circumstances that justify long sentences. I personally have difficulty with a lot of the criminal justice system and how we decide on punishments. But to apply the death penalty equally to some of those heinous crimes, as you do to Robert Robertson, who, unless I am missing something, I'm not. But if I were to be missing something in his case, I would be glad to be educated on it. The thing is, I've gone through everything. I agree with the original experts who changed their mind because they realized they were missing some facts.
Right. And so I feel now, granted, he just skated execution again, so it's alarming. But his case is actually sort of it's like a case study case.
It is.
And it's all the ways you shouldn't act when this is happening, right?
Right, but we can't control people's actions and thoughts.
No, but you have to learn from it, right?
Yeah.
This is for people to look at this case. It spanned time. It had the ultimate penalty. It was a truly innocent victim. So it's got all these elements to it, right? And then if you look into, I mean, I guess somebody could disagree and that's fine, but I don't believe that he didn't kill her because I want to believe that. I believe that he did not kill her because there's a butt ton of evidence that indicates she died essentially from sepsis, right?
Correct.
And it is backed by all the different things that played into that.
Right. So what happened to her in terms of what medically happened to her? It was an anomaly that simple-minded medical technicians would not be aware of. And that's a rare thing that, like, nurses with years of experience, even doctors with years of experience, aren't getting all of the information. So if you want to look at it from a technical, clinical, legal perspective, by their ignorance, we create Brady material because we left things out, and experts and prosecutors and defense attorneys only get dribs and drabs of what appear to all be bad facts favoring Robert Robertson having murdered Nikki. So that's the clinical way to look at it, is like you have all of this potentially exculpatory material that people just weren't smart enough to think of, if you want to go that way. Or you could go with, we got it wrong, which for some reason, there are criminal justice systems and jurists in the country who cannot admit that. And they certainly won't admit that a colleague got it wrong. And that's how we end up with this ongoing, looming execution, having to have all of these resources dumped into it. Because I promise you, there's a better place to put these resources by people who are in the position to take action, simply taking the correct action to begin with. And keeping, like, at this point, they should literally commute a sentence until they figure it out, because we've already created enough of a question that, like, even if they feel justified, whoever they might be, legislators, the governor, the Court of Criminal Appeals, the justices for the Supreme Court of Texas, all of those people could potentially, like, justify having done all of their due diligence and they've decided on the right opinion. But do you really trust a Court of Criminal Appeals judge to be smarter than an expert who says, we missed this medically, and I didn't know enough for the last 10 years to realize how wrong I was? And even the person who was the person to identify this syndrome has now pointed out they never intended for it to go this way.
I don't trust them. And part of that is because she's saying that the experts said what they said. It just doesn't apply here, like, all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's just completely changing the facts of the narrative of the case. And that's ridiculous. I don't even see, I would love to see, where she got that opinion. You said you don't think she really read everything.
I know she did.
She headline skimmed, which I hope that's the case, right?
Yeah.
But in the event, like, she really did get good information, I feel like her brain flipped a switch and said, okay, so how can we justify this?
Which is even
justify
worse.
it by well, that's what I'm saying. We can justify it by saying, well, the shaken baby syndrome thing doesn't matter here. Like, this baby was beaten to death. And okay, really? That just came out of pretty much nowhere. And it defies where the case has come to, right? It's crazy. That's even worse. And that's, like I said before, that's where her brain is going to flip a switch every single time and head in a different direction.
Yeah, and it's getting to be that way a little bit. And I mean, we've seen stuff, you and I, we've watched trials this year, a couple of them, where the outcomes were unexpected. And we've noted that, like, it's almost like some juries are overcompensating and some juries just don't get it. And, like, I think we're close to the verge of a complete breakdown of certain aspects of the criminal justice system in terms of reliability. And in my opinion, that's why I'm so drawn to all the questions I have about Robert Robertson. And when I started looking at this, I thought that I was going to do something similar to what the lazy judge did, and that I was going to come to a point where it was going to flip a switch for me. But it didn't exist in what the Court of Criminal Appeals got. It didn't exist in what the Texas Supreme Court got. It does not seem to exist in the case file, which I believe, accepting some of the motions that occurred between 2016 and 2019, I believe I've read all of them. There were some things that were not readily available to me in that little chunk of time, but I believe I've read everything else available in this case, seen most of the exhibits, gotten my hands on most of the information, and I've come to the conclusion that a lot of the people involved in the adversarial part of this, from the perspective of being pro-execution and upholding the death penalty for Robert Robertson, they're going to be the people that cause the implosion of aspects of the criminal justice system.
Right. And what that means essentially is no one's ever going to know if it was a justified death penalty case or not, because it's insane, right?
Yeah, we're just to the point where we have, like, I almost think some of them are doing it for clicks, but I believe that some of these people are doing it because they believe.
I feel like I really do feel like in some cases that are so obvious. In my opinion, this is one of those cases. It took a really long time to get it to like sort of the front of the pack and have I guess it's national now. I don't really know. I didn't have it come across in my news this time. I think I did last year. But watching that happen though, I feel like it's almost like anybody who's saying differently, they're literally gaslighting us.
I don't even think they're gaslighting us at this point. I think they're just, I think we've gotten to a point where certain professions have churned out so many people, and so many people got promoted just because they were standing there, that we've now considered their 5 years of barely middling to be expertise. So we're electing them to positions that, like, not only do they not have the experience or expertise to fulfill that position, like, all of the people around them have enabled it to the point that, like, they don't want them where they are. So the best thing they can do is support them moving laterally or up and out. And, like, it's getting to be that way everywhere. But one of the things that it's the most kind of critical mass is the criminal justice system. So when you're moving somebody who's barely a lawyer into a position to be a court of criminal appeals judge, and they only win by a quarter of the votes or something,
are not being run against.
Well, in this case, it was like 6 million to 5 million votes between her and the other candidate. It was very much a party line drawn there. One was one party, one was the other. And we end up with this person being the one who's elected and fulfilling the duties. And, like, Texas is one of those places that the ability to recall is pretty much nil. Like, particularly when it comes to these high-level judges, it's sort of a lifetime thing once you're elected. Even though you may not be reelected, you're going to become some other type of jurist in that field. And it's just unfortunate because we're not going to be able to use that person for this field for very long, because at some point in time, they will reveal themselves to be inept.
Right, and they'll drive it right off the road.
Right. So Robert Robertson, his appeal has been granted, and his stay of execution has occurred yet again in 2025. You got anything else on this guy?
What was can he still have a new date set?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're still at a point where, like, they're going to try and figure out what to do with it. We could be here next year yet again.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a long update. I apologize for that. That's me running off, because it's really infuriating when I know, like, I can see they're doing the wrong thing, and, like, there's just no way to fix it the way that everyone is interacting with each other. The people who could are clearly up in arms about something. I had another update. So this update's a little older, and we kind of talked about it briefly. And then you had a story that I wanted to put in here for today for like the main case. But the other update is out of Northern Virginia. So where we get this is from NBC Washington, which I think is Channel 4 up there. I actually made a mistake and printed out the text-only field of this. But Drew Wilder has been reporting on this. We've talked about it numerous times. This is a case that, like you and I were talking about, may be a trial. This is Brendan Banfield. So what I wanted to bring up today about this case is I got this piece of a recording. It's attached to one of Drew Wilder's like sort of sensational headlines, but it's fascinating, and I'm going to bring it up. It says, "Au pair gives prosecutors grisly account of fetish sex plot murders." Have you read this part? It
I'm
came
not
out.
sure.
We covered that, like we thought some of this was going to be coming out, and that there's some hearings. We covered that part. This is so interesting. I wanted to read this to you and get your take on it kind of live. I apologize for kind of dumping this on you, but it's fascinating. Here's the text of the article. "The au pair who pleaded guilty in connection with a double homicide in Northern Virginia described the gruesome killings for prosecutors in a video entered as evidence provided by defense counsel to News 4." So this is News 4 to this writer. "Last year, prosecutors questioned Juliana Perez Malgahiz as part of her plea agreement. She alleged the man she was having an affair with, her employer, Brendan Banfield, had masterminded an elaborate plot to kill his wife, Christine. Banfield denies all these allegations. His attorney provides this video to News 4. Banfield claims his wife invited another man named Joseph Ryan to their bedroom to fulfill a BDSM sex fantasy. This is the morning of February 24, 2023. Banfield says he arrived too late to save his wife's life. Perez accuses Banfield of lying. About a year and a half after the killing, she went on the record with Fairfax County prosecutors, saying that she and Banfield had had an affair, claiming he spent months masterminding a plan to kill his wife to take her out of the picture. Perez said Brendan Banfield told her about a website called FetLife.com, a kink, BDSM, and fantasy dating website. She said that Banfield created a fake profile on FetLife pretending to be Christine. She said the two of them would log into Christine's work computer and attempt to solicit someone over to their house to perform a rape fantasy with Christine. With this article on NBCWashington.com, they include bits and pieces of Juliana Perez Malgahiz talking about this case, and it is fascinating. If you haven't seen it, you want to, I will put that in the show notes. You need to go see it. First of all, they picked the worst possible camera angle for this woman. There's like a table camera mounted, and it's basically looking up her nostrils the entire time she's talking, which is horrible. But what she describes is fascinating. Here's what she says. "The morning of the killings, Brendan Banfield pretended to go to his job as a law enforcement agent for the IRS, but instead he drove to a nearby McDonald's and waited for her call. Christine Banfield had been left asleep in her bedroom, and they hid her cell phone downstairs in the kitchen. Juliana Perez says she took the couple's 4-year-old daughter to a car under the pretense they would be headed to the zoo. She says she concealed a gun that Brendan Banfield had given her and told her to carry that morning. And then Joseph Ryan arrived with a knife and restraints. According to her testimony to prosecutors, she says, that's when Brendan had instructed me before, as soon as I was to see Joe's car, for me to call him right away. So that's what I did. Next, she called Christine Banfield's hidden phone. So when Brendan Banfield arrives, he and Perez entered the house with the 4-year-old girl through a back basement door. They left the child downstairs in the basement as they went to the first floor. Banfield entered the couple's bedroom with the gun drawn. He announced himself as law enforcement, and Perez followed him. Joseph Ryan was on top of Christine Banfield, who yelled, "Brendan, he has a knife." Banfield almost immediately shot Joseph Ryan in the head. she was like, okay, why did you do this? Call 911, according to Juliana's testimony to prosecutors. She did, police have said, but she hung up before saying anything, as she said that Brendan Banfield gestured for her to get off the phone shortly after she was connected with a dispatcher. Juliana Perez then told prosecutors she saw Brendan Banfield take Joseph Ryan's knife and stab his wife in the neck. He was stabbing her. She was just telling him, please let me go. I'm already going to die anyways. I'm going to bleed to death. She was just, leave me here, let me die. And he was telling her, I can't. I don't know why she said, I can't. I don't know why he said, I can't. So according to police, Christine Banfield was stabbed multiple times in different parts of her body. Ryan was still moving after the gunshot to his head. And according to Juliana Perez, Brendan Banfield instructed her to shoot Joseph Ryan again, which she did. She claimed shortly after this, Brendan Banfield started to manipulate the crime scene, including putting his wife's blood on Joseph Ryan's hands and arms. Over the next 8 months, detectives returned to the home, and something stood out. It appeared to them that after the killings, Juliana Perez had moved into the master bedroom with Banfield, which you and I talked about at length. The picture in the bedside frame had been swapped out for a photo of Brendan Banfield and Juliana Perez. Police also said during one of these visits, they heard the 4-year-old girl call Juliana Perez Mommy. In October 2023, Fairfax County Police arrested Juliana Perez and charged her with Joseph Ryan's murder. Over the next year, Brendan Banfield remained free until police arrested him in September 2024, charged him with 4 counts of aggravated murder. Prosecutors offered Juliana Perez a deal, testify against Brendan in exchange for a manslaughter conviction with a much, much shorter jail sentence. Currently, Brendan Banfield is scheduled for trial pretty shortly. It's going to be kind of a Halloween time trial. But something weird happened this week in this case, and I don't know exactly what's happening here. When this happens, I hold off a little bit usually. I have not had time to thoroughly investigate this next part, but it also comes out of ABC 7 News. It says Fairfax County prosecutor taken off a pair double murder case after drinking incident. Said there's a big shakeup in a Fairfax County double homicide, receiving some national attention. The lead prosecutor has been replaced. This comes as the prosecutor now finds himself in legal trouble. The Brendan Banfield murder trial was set to begin next week, but in court Wednesday this week. So that's, what's today? The 15th, October the 15th, is the day that they're talking about here. Ends up being delayed, so they've reset this trial for January. This comes after the lead prosecutor, Eric Klingon, is being placed on leave for a, quote, personal matter. This is a Commonwealth attorney that's drunk. A police officer can be heard saying, in police body camera video, which was first reported on apparently by ABC 7 News I-Team's John Barr. 2 months ago, officers said Klingon, a Fairfax deputy Commonwealth attorney, was drinking and smoking outside of his car shortly after 8 a.m. in the back of a Goodwill parking lot. I'm going to head to work and forget all about this, Klingon told the officers, but officers saw an open beer bottle on the hood of Klingon's parked car and an empty beer bottle nearby. They noted that the beer had a higher than normal concentration of alcohol and cited him for drinking in public. He's been drinking, one officer tells another officer over the phone. He said he's going to work here soon, and I'm like, no, you're not. Our complainant said you normally come over here and park, the officer told Klingon. They didn't describe who they were. They said they drive through this area every day, and they see you normally here this time with your car, and they see you drinking. This looks terrible, Klingon later told officers, and I get it. After officers said they would drive Eric Klingon home, Klingon requested to be driven in the front seat of the police car. Officers did not cuff Klingon, instead drove him in the front seat of a police cruiser up to his house. An officer who had recognized him said he was trying to help him. He said, he's being cool, right? This comes from someone at the Fairfax County Police Department. And he says, yeah. And he says, to me, that makes all the difference. He says, you're in a position, I don't want you. I'm trying to help you in the best way possible. This is the officer speaking on body camera to Eric Klingon. 7 News is going to let you know what happens with Eric Klingen's case, but they're looking ahead to the murder trial. The Commonwealth said its exhibits show Banfield posed in photos with the family's au pair, including photos in Bayshore, New York, another picture at a pub and a concert hall, and another photo shows them together in what appears to be a bathtub. They said the photo was seen on a nightstand in the Banfield home, and this was all evidence showing that Banfield and the au pair had an extramarital relationship. So that's the other piece of news in this weird case.
What is he doing?
The prosecutor?
Why is he drinking behind the Goodwill?
Because he hates his life. He hates his job. That is where he's at. He does not need to be a prosecutor. But can you imagine being prosecuted for DUI by someone who's just trashed? In court?
Oh, no. That is no. No.
Right? See? You get it. You get what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, I do get it. And honestly, I guess that is so weird to me. Like you must be right. He must really hate his life because, like, why isn't he drinking at home?
Well, I mean,
I guess that's my biggest question.
He is hiding what he's doing. He's obviously not hiding it all that well. I am sure his colleagues are aware of what's happening. You know,
it's just the craziest thing to me, like how this kind of like, and the cops are trying to help him. I don't feel like that's right. But whatever. I'm more concerned about sort of what's behind this, because you are absolutely right. Every single DUI case that he's ever prosecuted should be chucked because of this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, but also he's drinking a beer that has a higher concentration of alcohol than normal.
If you're drinking one of these like pale ales that has 11% alcohol in it at 8:00 in the morning, it can't be great.
This is just really a bad look.
So I kind of dumped all that together, and I apologize for doing that, but it's all related to the Brendan Banfield case. But I wanted to know from you, what did you think of the whole scenario Juliana Perez Malgahiz lays out there?
I think that's probably pretty close to what happened.
That's what I think too.
I had speculated. So for one thing, there was a timing thing here because the nanny was charged, it seems like quite a bit before Brendan Banfield was charged. And I'm not exactly sure, I'm not exactly sure how he roped her into this.
The nanny?
Yes. And then I think that answered one of the questions, because they said that they could prove she was on the computer, and I think that was because of the work computer.
Right. And that was the other thing we had brought up previously. You're 100%.
She confessed to getting on it, right? Like they orchestrated that.
Yeah. Because there had been some trouble where they were rearranging members of the police department because they had asked this guy to do some really strictly technical stuff. And he said, look, it's Christine Banfield logging into her work computer where this account has been running in the background. Like, it's her credentials.
Right, but they just used her credentials.
That appears to be what the likely outcome of all that is based on this information here.
Right. And so I had figured that I believe what the nanny is saying, the au pair is saying. I don't believe that she's going to lie. I also believe that she could have been surprised that she was arrested.
Well, you and I have kind of a couple things. We had speculated that it was going to be important when Christine Banfield died. I think at one point you had posited that she was already dead when the guy arrives. And then this contradicts that a little, but the rest of your theory holds.
Well, and I'm fine. And that's why I'm saying I did think she was probably dead before he got there. But I don't think the nanny's lying in her confession or her story that she's giving.
Well, that version of the story is much more horrifying than what you and I thought it was.
It absolutely is. That's what I was going to say before he ever got there. But I do see where that might not have worked as well, because they needed him to be very close to her. And if she was dead,
yeah,
he might not have gotten very close to her if he had already seen, an issue. It's very sad that Christine was like, just let me die. I'm going to bleed to death.
I cannot believe, I believe her story, but I'm just saying, this is awful.
And he was like, I can't. And that's because, I think she said she didn't know why he said he couldn't, but, he needed to make sure she was dead, which is cold-hearted. And the absolute terror.
Yeah. That your spouse stabbing you to death while they just shot this other person?
While your nanny's watching?
That's what I'm like. That part, all of that, is what makes it so much more horrifying than what I imagined. It
is much worse.
If that's the story she's going to tell on the stand, first of all, I don't know why his defense attorneys leaked this, but I will go ahead and tell you that.
Do you think it was the defense attorneys that leaked it?
That's what they said. They said that this video was provided to the press by Brendan Banfield's attorney. I don't know what he saw there that I'm not seeing, but if this is a part of what they were, quote, giving out to bolster their case.
Are they saying she's a liar?
I think he's run out of money and they're trying to make sure that the client pleads out.
That's weird. It doesn't help him at all.
No, it not only does it not help him, maybe they're trying to taint the jury pool so that anybody who has seen this and taken an interest in it isn't there, and then they get this suppressed somehow.
I'm not sure what's going on here. I do know this was never going to work.
No.
I think what I laid out in one of our, the first episode we covered or whatever, my theory, I was pretty close. The nanny is saying they killed her after they had shot Joseph Ryan.
Right.
And that's different than what I imagined, but it's also much, much worse.
Correct.
And I think that the reason I don't think she thought she was going to get arrested for this. I think she believed in Brendan Banfield. And I think that she confesses because she felt deceived, right? Because otherwise,
they have nothing.
Why is she talking?
I don't know.
Right?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Because she was clearly in on this. She tells them. She could have actually given a story and said, I had no idea this was about to happen.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, she could have done that. I would say, in your opinion, dumb or smart on Brendan Banfield? What do you think? Dumb or smart?
He's really dumb.
So
I think that he really didn't have a true relationship with her, and he used her.
I think she is also maybe not the brightest bulb in the bush.
I don't think she is either.
So when you have two people making this quote unquote infallible murder plot, end quote, you're not dealing with genius level critical thinking skills.
Right. And they got some tunnel vision there, right? I feel like anybody that is plotting and carries out something like this, they have got major tunnel vision. My question is, why is she, because she's not saying, oh, it was self-defense. She's saying, look, we set this all up and then we killed them.
Well, a year in jail will do that to you.
I mean, maybe it just seems, do you think if he had been arrested when she was, that she would have confessed, though? I think that it was the fact that he was not arrested, like she was basically
I
going
would
to
buy
take
that. Yep.
the fall for it, right?
Yeah, she had months to think about, because before she makes this statement, she's been in there a long time, and it's clearly not treating her well. If you go and see this video, to be incarcerated like this, and I'm sure, like, she started to realize her circumstances were precarious, and I say that based on the fact that, like, he's out running around free for a year and probably dips off the lovey-dovey shit because he's not bright. And he probably is a little paranoid during that time to even talk to her. And she starts to feel alone, and rightfully so, like used.
Right. And my question is, okay, to some extent, I don't really know the ins and outs of leading up to that morning, but for all intents and purposes, Brendan Banfield could have done this completely by himself.
Correct.
There was no reason that the au pair had to come back to the house with the daughter. I am glad to hear they left the daughter in the basement, sort of. I mean, not really, but that was better than her witnessing this, right?
Yes.
Okay, and so he could have shot Joseph Ryan, who was over Christine Banfield. He could have, and then proceeded to stab her without the au pair being there. Okay. Why didn't he do it that way?
Because he's dumb.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, like, this is not okay. So first of all,
I think he thought he needed a witness.
I agree with you. That's what he thought he was doing to make it somehow work. It was never a good idea.
Well, it's so funny because, like, that is the actual opposite of love. To bring her into this like that.
Let me put you through this trauma.
Exactly, and kill his wife.
Yeah.
Like, that's going to be you in a few years.
Yeah, like,
hello.
like how does she not know that? Like, how does she not understand that, like, in terms of when the next thing happens if everything goes perfectly and they get off for the murder, like, she can never be anything except future co-defendants with him. And that power dynamic is never going to work.
Well, right. And I guess part of my surprise was remember I think we listened to the 911 calls maybe, or maybe we read the transcript, but she was already saying things like...
Oh, she didn't. Yeah, she was off script, like, as soon as the 911 calls were rolling. And
she was saying, like, he was down, but I shot him again or whatever. And, like, it was almost like, to me, the way that I heard, which it sounded different because in what you were talking about, she said that he had given her the gun that morning.
Yes.
And she had it with her. Instead of, in the 911 call, she said something like, he told me to go to the other room and get the gun, right? Or something like that.
Correct.
And so I'm wondering, like, I honestly think, and it possibly almost worked. I'm not really sure why there was such a delay. I think he was like 100% setting her up to take the fall for this.
He may have been, and she may have realized that. Like, her attorneys may have enlightened her to that being...
Because otherwise, why involve her at all?
Oh, I agree.
Unless they're just like a really deranged couple, right? Because he could have done all that himself. But I think when she was on the phone with 911, I think she screwed it up from the jump.
I think she went off script. It probably goes something like, he tells her to keep the gun on her, and that's the whole reason she has it, and she's supposed to, like, be the other person with the gun to confuse the scene. And when she doesn't have it, and she's calling 911 and, like, not sure what to do, because, like, no matter, like, how strong or insane a person you are, if you're standing there watching someone who has just shot another person in the head take a knife out of their hands and kill his spouse, it's going to have an immediate effect on you physically and psychologically from the shock of what you're experiencing. And like it's going to take you a minute to catch back up to reality. So being off script, he never could have anticipated that was going to happen. He should have, but he's too blinded by his own raging narcissism that made him think, why divorce her? Which I do not understand that concept unless it's, custody and money.
Well, and the au pair saying, sure, I'll go along with you on this instead of saying just divorce her. Like, that's a leap there.
Well, it's not just a leap. Like, I don't like, okay, this is me speaking personally, and maybe I'm just ignorant to love. I don't have anyone, even in past terrible partners, that like, that's the place I go. Like, I don't have a moment where I think involving a current / future partner in the death of a current / past partner makes any sense to me whatsoever.
Exactly. It absolutely doesn't. And I think that he was setting her up to take the fall 100%. And I think maybe there were some alarming things that happened. Like, for example, just leave me. I'm going to bleed to death. Don't keep stabbing me. It hurts. It's painful. I'm suffering. And that might have been a reality check. Right?
Well, one good flash of yourself laying there, that'll do it.
Well, and to me, oh my gosh, that is so terrible. I think I like my version better, but I mean, I understand that I just made that out of nowhere, but are based on the information we got, right? But it was so callous. It's almost like she instantaneously regretted it because, she didn't touch Christine Banfield.
Correct.
And she shot Joe Ryan the second time, Joseph Ryan.
That's because Brendan Banfield, in all of his scheme of schemes, failed to even kill the man that he thought he was going to have to kill. And he made the nanny do it.
Right, exactly. And I don't see, that's the other thing though. I don't think that it's weird how the au pair says, the au pair says that Christine said, Brendan, he has a knife. Like, that's the only thing you're bringing to the attention. It's weird, right?
No, again, so that's Christine asking her husband for help.
Right, I know, but like,
she's warning him so that he can take care of this intruder.
Man, can you imagine what went through Joseph Ryan's head?
Oh, that dude was so confused by what was happening.
And he died.
Yep. Like, that is like, those two people's last moments on Earth were among the most horrific you will read about in terms of not understanding what was happening. Because that guy thinks he's coming over for a little
and he's doing something completely consensual, planned out.
Positive, pleasurable for the two of them because they have this thing in common. And he has no idea she's wildly ignorant and completely like foreign to the concept of what he's about to do. So there's the complete dumbfoundedness that would be going through that guy's mind.
And so why didn't they let him like take the fall for it?
Because they screwed it up.
Because they had to kill him.
Yeah, like when Brendan Banfield fails to kill him and he had not, I don't think the plan was for that guy to actually murder Christine. So they end up having to doctor the scene. And then you have Juliana, who you thought was going to help as a witness, who is now not helping at all. Like, if you look at it from the perspective of like, what would a version of Brendan Banfield's plan that was going to work look like? None of this is involved in that. It's the best laid plans. He had this idea, which like should have stayed a fantasy in the back of his mind while he went and found a divorce attorney.
Right. Like, this plan is never going to work. No variation of it. No iteration of it. Nothing about this is ever going to work. And so it's amazing to me that I think the biggest thing that shocked me was how long it took for him to be arrested, right?
Right.
It took a long time for him to be arrested, it seemed like. Because I think the very first time we talked about this, she was in jail, he wasn't.
Correct.
He hadn't been charged or anything.
Correct.
And there's just so much that is insane here that I don't understand. And then, maybe I don't know what the motivation was as far as why both of them together. Why is she talking so easily like, she was apparently. And I haven't watched the video, but I will. And you read what she said, which is, almost exactly what I imagined happened.
Correct.
And then, she was on board with it. Was her motivation that she was just going to step into Christine Banfield's life, and that's why she was okay with her being murdered? It's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
That goes against kind of human nature.
It does. And it's one of those things that, no matter how many times I look at it, it's very confusing.
Do you think he's going to take a plea?
He should. With that kind of setup going on, honestly, he should take a plea.
I think the person who creates that setup is not capable of taking a plea.
I was going to sort of qualify that and say, I think an intelligent man in his position would take a plea, but I don't think an intelligent man would be in his position.
Well, what could he say? He
Nothing.
could continue the self-defense claim.
He could say
that she's a jilted lover.
I don't know. It is so difficult for me to wrap my mind around what was going on here in the first place that he ever thought any of this was better than a divorce.
Oh yeah, no, it definitely was. This was never, ever, ever going to work.
Yeah, I'm having too much trouble wrapping my head around what's going on.
He might have been able to get away with self-defense if he had let the au pair and his daughter just go to the museum,
the zoo, yeah,
or whatever, and said, I came back home. There was a guy on top of my wife. He had stabbed her. I shot him, and she bled to death.
Right.
That might have worked. But see, the problem would be that, Christine would possibly be alive, right?
Right.
And that's part of why he was like, I can't just, let you bleed out. This is part of the whole thing. And if you're not dead, that ruins that, right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's evil.
So we're already getting long in the tooth. There's a case I wanted to talk about with you. Do you have much more on the Banfield Perez Malgahese thing?
No, I don't. I'm interested to see if it goes to trial. So because of the prosecutor being removed,
it's been delayed out to January.
Yes.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's at a time when I have several trials that I'm involved in. So I don't know. I don't know that I can watch it in real time. That'll probably, if it goes to trial, I think they televise up there, but I'll have to check. I don't know that I'll be able to go and see it in person.
I would watch this one. I don't think it will be very long.
Well, I'm interested to see what they do if they do a trial, and this is once this has some resolution. And honestly, in this particular case, meaning this au pair double murder, because that's what they call it, I would cover future updates on it just like I'm doing now. It's one of those things that I'm interested in it from the perspective that it's crazy. The whole situation is just so confusing and out of sorts that I keep talking about it and I keep reading about it.
It is. It's a crazy case.
And I know I've kind of derailed today's episode with the Robert Robertson thing and now the au pair homicide update, but I did want to talk about something that you brought up with me, largely because there were updates in this year. It's not a super long thing. It is a fun rabbit hole to go down to see all the twists and turns. I'm going to cover it kind of in summary to a degree. You've heard about this case before. When did you first hear about this?
Actually, just recently.
Okay.
Surprisingly.
This is an older case that it has a National Registry of Exonerations entry. There's a lot of news articles about it. I think I heard about it in passing prior to this year, but It didn't. A couple of the details didn't stick with me until you had mentioned it recently, and it's a murder that other podcasts have covered and stuff along the way, but we had never talked about it, and it has a couple of absurd elements to it where you and I were just like, "What?" It's the murder of a man named Franklin Bonner. He dies back in January of 2009. So on January 16, 2009, Linda Bonner, she finds her 68-year-old husband, Franklin, duct taped to a chair, and the duct tape is also over his nose and his mouth. He's in their home in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He's not breathing. He's taken for emergency care, and when he gets to the hospital, he's pronounced dead, and the cause of death is suffocation. Now, Franklin Bonner is a marijuana salesman. He is known as the lottery man. He is known to carry cash on him because of selling weed. Now, there are signs that are noted in the autopsy of blunt force trauma. A woman named Shirley Bumpus, Bumpass, she lives about 2 miles away from the Bonner residence, and she tells police that she had called Franklin that morning and come to his house and purchased marijuana from him. So police come to the conclusion that she's probably the last person to have seen Franklin alive, which means there's a strong possibility she could be involved in his death. On the duct tape, which is a terrible mechanism of death, police find 11 fingerprints and a hair. Duct tape is a very sticky thing, and by sticky, I mean literally sticky. It has so much adhesive on it. It's a great place for evidence to get trapped. At the time, police take these prints and they run them through the Automated Fingerprint Information System, or AFIS. AFIS does not result in identification on these prints. So 9 years go past. And in 2018, a 23-year-old woman named Angel Bumpus, who is Shirley Bumpus's granddaughter, she fails to appear for a traffic ticket in Kentucky. A warrant is issued for her arrest, and on June 14th of 2018, Angel is arrested. She goes through the standard booking process, and during the standard booking process, her fingerprints are taken, and that fingerprint record is entered into that same automated fingerprint information system. The database runs in the background, automatically searching new records against unidentified crime scene prints. And that search, when she's booked, indicates that she is a candidate source of 2 partial prints from the duct tape found at the scene of Franklin Bonner's homicide. Fingerprint analysts do a further analysis, and they conclude that Angel Bumpus was the source of those prints. She is then arrested for murder and aggravated robbery. What's interesting about this case, and why we're bringing it up to kind of talk about it a little bit here in today's episode, is that Angel Bumpus was 13 years old when Franklin Bonner's murder took place. According to records, she's 5 foot tall and weighed 80 pounds in the 8th grade.
So she is tiny.
Tiny person. She had moved away as a teenager. By the time of her arrest, she had 2 children. She was a student at Jefferson Community and Technical College in Louisville, Kentucky. And according to her, she had no involvement in this crime. At about the same time as Angel Bumpus is being arrested in June of 2018, a man named Nicholas Cheaton, who was a federal prisoner serving time for bank robbery, told police that his cousin, Mallory Vaughn, had admitted to committing the crime. Although Nicholas Cheaton subsequently recants this claim, said he was trying to get a sentence reduction. Vaughn, who was 26 at the time of the murder, was also arrested and charged with murder and aggravated robbery. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and throw this out there. If you go down this rabbit hole, you will notice that in 2025, Nicholas Cheaton is being arrested for multiple murders that he has been indicted on. He, I think at this point, would qualify as a serial killer, but I don't think he's a serial killer in the terms of the predators you and I talk about. I think he's what you loosely describe as an asshole killer, where someone takes part in other crimes and end up killing people who are witnesses or people who anger them during the commission of said crimes. For his part, Mallory Vaughn denied being involved in this crime. He claimed that he's never met Angel Bumpus. So in the fall of 2019, Mallory Vaughn and Angel Bumpus, who is being tried, even though she was 13 at the time of the crime, she's 23 now, she's being tried as an adult in Hamilton County Circuit Court. The prosecution presents testimony that Angel Bumpus is the source of these partial prints. The defense presents evidence that Angel Bumpus had been at school on the day of the crime and had arrived home around 3 p.m. Franklin Bonner's wife had found him about 5 p.m. The defense argued that the window of 2 hours to walk the 2 miles to Bonner's home, commit the crime, and return was not logical or probable. According to Angel's grandfather, he testified he did do odd jobs occasionally for Bonner. Angel would often help her grandfather in the garage and would play with the rolls of duct tape kept there. The tape itself had been destroyed in the years after the crime, but the fingerprint record remained. On October 3rd, 2019, the jury convicts Angel Bumpus of first-degree felony murder, meaning felony is being committed and a death occurs, and aggravated robbery. Now, Mallory Vaughn is acquitted, but Angel Bumpus is sentenced to life in prison.
And they were tried together with one jury.
Correct.
And they did not know one another.
Correct. They seemingly have no connection to each other.
Right. And that was one of the really bizarre things because can you imagine being on trial with a stranger?
That would be a very difficult way to try and defend yourself.
The narrative of the situation was that you, when you were 13 years old and you weighed 80 pounds and you were 5 foot tall, and this stranger that you do not know killed a man by essentially smothering him to death with duct tape. That's essentially what happened. Taping someone up with duct tape is one of the absolute worst ways to die, in my opinion.
It's a very slow and painful death, I would imagine.
Well, right, because you just slowly are smothered.
You're suffocating, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's awful, but it also cannot be accomplished with I don't think it can be accomplished by a 5 foot tall, 80 pound, 13-year-old when you're talking about a grown man that was killed, right? And
I could be persuaded otherwise, but it is a long persuasion that's going to take me that direction.
I'm not saying that a 13-year-old couldn't kill. I'm just saying that particular method, I just don't see it happening. I see, because there were no other injuries. Like he was literally bound and he had, if I recall, he had the duct tape like all the way around his face, right?
Right.
And why would he just let that happen? Because essentially that's what, if a 13-year-old girl's doing it, that's what would be happening. He would be just letting her do that. And so that's why I think it was the optics of the fact that they're like, oh yeah, but there was this man there too.
Right.
You see, but so the duct tape, her fingerprints were on the sticky side of the duct tape. And that posed this like gigantic problem. And I was kind of torn on it because I was thinking to myself, is this just a mistake? Right?
What do you mean?
Well, like, is it really not a match that they're saying is a match? Like, is there something else to it, right? Because to some extent, APHIS, it provides leads, right?
I think maybe a mix-up would be more likely than like that. But I guess I don't like.
Well, there was a match made. So APHIS took her arrested. So she was arrested for failing to appear for a traffic violation, and her fingerprints went in the system, and there was a match made. So APHIS plucked her from obscurity, right? And said, hey, this matches this. And then analysts looked at it and said, yeah, that was good enough, right?
Right.
Now, my question is, how many other people came back as a match or whatever, right? There's a lot, I'm not convinced that fingerprint evidence is the best evidence, right?
Right.
But there are some details about this case. For example, Angel Bumpus's grandfather did odd jobs at the victim's home.
Right.
Okay, so that's a connection that APHIS is not going to know, right?
Right.
So it's matching a possible scenario logically, even though the fact that she was 13 at the time, it didn't seem like she had time to get there, whatever. So it's not like it's out of left field completely. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
It wasn't somebody in California who had never been anywhere near where this man was found murdered, right?
Right.
And so that makes me go, wait, what's happening? Well, the sticky side of the duct tape. Now, she was not. I don't know about the DNA situation. I'm not really even sure that they checked DNA, but there were 9 other unidentified fingerprints.
Right.
And there were only 2 partial prints of hers on the duct tape. There was not a single fingerprint anywhere else in the house of her.
Right.
And so I think it was one piece that went across his mouth. I think that's where the 2 pieces, I think the 2 prints were on that one piece, or maybe there was 2 pieces and there was 1 print on each. And, I was thinking about that, and I was sort of, because I'm like, how did you get a fingerprint on duct tape if you're not there? Right?
Well, the partial print thing I can explain if you want to. I've seen this recently in a case if you want to know.
Well, I'm just saying, it seems like it could be incriminating, but in this case, I'm looking for how it's not incriminating, right? So go ahead.
So I have recently had a case where a large roll of duct tape was used in a home invasion style robbery. And the fingerprints that were in dispute were from one of the people who was robbed. And she said she'd never used the duct tape. She'd never had anything to do with the duct tape. I believe her. The way that her fingerprints end up on the duct tape is the other party said she did. She just doesn't realize she reached up and moved it out of the way of something else she wanted on the shelf. And when I looked at the duct tape and where they were talking about the partial prints were, this also a smaller person, etc. If she had reached up and grabbed it on each side and pressed down just enough to move it from one space to another space a couple inches away, she would have left about half of her fingerprint on the mashed down portion of the duct tape that would have happened. And the person who came into the home later didn't have anything on them. They grabbed that duct tape because it was sitting in that other spot where this person had moved it. So the duct tape is actually kind of deep. If you've ever looked at a roll of it, and this woman's fingerprints would have been on the next round if they had kept tearing tape off. Actually takes quite a bit of duct tape to go around the body.
Yeah, it does.
So it's left. So the duct tape in the case I'm talking about was left attached to the person. Like, so
The roll was.
right. They had rolled it around them and tucked the whole roll without tearing it behind them. So her fingerprints are on it. I mean, she's ruled out early on in our case because of that reason. But the man explained to me that it was his duct tape. And the only time he could think that she would have touched the duct tape would have been moving it the way that he described to me. And that's exactly where her fingerprints were. And they were partial prints as well.
Right. And so that makes perfect sense to me. I guess my problem was that it was on the sticky side.
It still was like it was on the sticky side in this case. Because it touched the, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like her fingers, like, kind of touched in
like multiple. So if they had the roll of duct tape, it would have been on multiple layers.
Correct. And it would have been on, it was kind of on the silver upside, but when the roll came back together, it then is on the sticky side.
Well, I came to the conclusion that to me, what you just described, I feel like that's reasonable. I mean, it does seem a little bit odd, but I get it. And then I came to the conclusion that, like, when you go to rip off a piece of duct tape, in theory, you could leave 2 fingerprints behind, like on the piece that you're not ripping off.
Maybe.
Because you hold it, right, to rip it?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if you're a little kid ripping it off, and then you have to, like, re-grip. I mean, to me...
I think a little kid leaves 10 prints.
Yeah, no kidding, right? I mean, that's what But so, anyway, it wasn't as convincing. So my thought was, and obviously the defense tried to present this. They were like, oh, well, the grandfather had the duct tape at home. He did some sort of project for the victim that had nothing to do with this. And he left the duct tape over there, right?
Yes.
At some point in time. Then the person who did this crime, they used the duct tape. And that's how Angel's fingerprints got on him. And it was weird because, like, nobody was buying that, right? A jury convicted her, right?
Correct.
And it was very sad. She had 2 little kids, and she was actually, I think they deliberated for, I want to say, a couple hours. It wasn't very long. He was completely exonerated of it. She was found guilty of both charges. She wanted to leave the courtroom with the bailiff immediately to go to jail because she said, I'm never going to see my kids again. I don't want to be standing here anymore. I have nothing to do with this, right?
Yeah.
So she's like, just take me to jail because whatever, there's nothing I can do about this. Something I saw, there was a jail phone call made that her defense attorneys had that I don't think they used it in her first trial or in her trial. But it was 2 of her brothers on the phone. One was incarcerated, one wasn't. And one of the brothers was explaining to the other brother that their little sister had been hooked up, which meant arrested, for this murder.
Yeah.
Right? And that they had fingerprints that had popped up. And he told him to think real hard because Angel was only 13 in 2009.
Yeah.
Think real hard about it, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that kind of indicated some guilt, right?
A better possibility than her.
Well, right, but their fingerprints weren't there, right?
Right.
But I was like, wow, and so they're going to let their sister take the fall? That's...
I agree with what you're saying, but I also think this is shitty police work, that nobody looked at this and went, that 13-year-old girl couldn't do this. We need to keep looking.
Okay, and see, that's exactly what I was thinking. For one, the guy that turned over the other guy, there was, like, no evidence against him whatsoever. And I wasn't even sure why he was being put on trial, except that
Nick was cheating.
It fit the scenario where this 13-year-old couldn't have done it by herself, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so she gets sentenced to 60 years in prison.
Life, basically.
And she is in prison for 3 years until her new attorney is able to get a new trial.
Yeah. So, are you ready to move on to that part?
Sure.
Okay. So in August of 2022, Judge Tom Greenholz, who, by the way, was the judge in the trial, he grants a defense motion for a new trial, and he ends up vacating Angel Bumpus's convictions. Now, this is a weird situation, but it's Tennessee, not Texas. So I'm just going to point out they seem to have a grasp on the criminal justice system a little further north of Texas. The judge rules there's several errors that have occurred during the trial. And collectively, he decides it's more than enough to put the problems with the case and the prosecution and the way that it was adjudicated back in front of a jury. So collectively, he's decided she's getting a new trial. And those errors include that originally the introduction of an 8th grade yearbook photo of Angel Bumpus was disallowed as being introduced into evidence. Now, the reason on the record is that the defense had not disclosed its intention to use this photo prior to trial. But Judge Greenholz says the exclusion of the photo from evidence as a sanction went beyond what was necessary to cure any prejudice. This innocent-looking 8th grade photo of Angel, who, if I'm reading everything correctly, the photo itself is like a year prior to the crime. So she's even smaller looking in the photo. And he thinks that was justification, but then he realizes it's not.
I just want to point out, like, so isn't this the judge that made that ruling?
It is. That's why
overturning himself.
Yeah,
basically.
Yeah.
And what kind of, okay, I'm not trying to be like facetious here, but what kind of prosecutor is objecting to presenting what the accused look like shortly before the crime?
I've been, and this could go way off into a tangent. I'll be really simple with it. I've been rereading the Stephen Avery trial.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things that were done in that case, regardless of where you fall in terms of he did it, he didn't do it, because that was a big deal after making him a murderer. I was just rereading it for giggles, and I actually found somebody recently that's doing that as a podcast, so I've been also listening to their take on it, where they're just reading the trial transcripts, and it's fascinating to me when stuff like that happens. But some of the absurd nonsense that I see every day is fully captured in the Stephen Avery trial, and it is definitely fully captured here. Your comment was, what kind of prosecutor does that? And the answer that I have for you is
all of them.
Any of them that can get away with it.
I feel like in the interest of justice, not a conviction, right? When you're actually trying to get justice for the victim and the victim's family, it makes absolutely no sense to object to the defense putting in a picture of the accused at around the time of the murder, based on the fact that, she wasn't charged for, 8, 10, I don't know, a long time later, right?
More than 9 years, yeah.
Okay. And so to me, I feel like that's a dumb objection. Of course, in this case, the prosecutor objected because the defense didn't properly notify them. The judge sustained the objection, didn't allow the picture in. And then on appeal, I don't know exactly, I think it was just a motion for a new trial maybe. But when he was ruling on that motion, he overturned himself.
He did. He ultimately overturns the way that he ruled in that case, which I actually think that shows great understanding of what's happened. And I think at some point he thought about that picture. That's the reason that it's brought up here. I think he thought about that ruling, and he was like, that little girl doing this crime makes no sense. And I think that's how we get to where we're headed here.
Right.
He rules that the prosecution had elicited information that had been ruled inadmissible. So that's a little bit of a tricky wicket. But basically, during the course of the trial in this case, taking place, 10 years after the crime, the defense didn't seek DNA analysis on a hair follicle that is found on the duct tape near one of the fingerprints that's linked to Angel Bumpus. The result of this is, and he notes this in his ruling, by the way, Judge Greenholz realizes in hindsight that created a suggestion that Angel Bumpus had a burden to prove her innocence, which is the opposite of what our entire judicial system is built on in terms of trials of defendants. The state is required to prove their guilt, not the defendant proving their innocence. He criticizes the defense to a degree, almost to the point of being ineffective to some degree, for failing to make appropriate objections to the prosecution's attempts to link Angel Bumpus to Mallory Vaughn through something that happened years later, where a relative of Angel Bumpus, I think they're referencing one of the brothers being tied back to Mallory Vaughn. I didn't see that exactly, because the whole point is the prosecution was trying to do it and the defense didn't object, so it didn't stand out to me in any of this.
I don't think it really stood out in the trial either, because he was acquitted, right?
Correct. And that's the last, they put together a last couple of points on a summary. And the last point that Judge Greenholz really makes is that Nicholas Cheaton testifies that he doesn't know the name Bumpus and he does not know anyone named Angel. So the judge noted that if he took all of Nicholas Cheaton's testimony in a light most favorable to the state, that Mr. Cheaton did not connect or implicate Angel Bumpus to the crime in any way. He basically says that him not connecting her means that like we're missing like a lot of evidence. And not only that, but Nicholas Cheaton is really brought in because he's testifying against Mallory Vaughn. Judge Greenholz, he ends up saying that the evidence is insufficient to establish that Angel Bumpus had anything to do with committing a robbery. Make sense?
Yes.
So if you don't have a robbery and she's not involved in the robbery, there's no way for her to have committed a felony murder.
Right.
So they boot the charges. On November 3rd, 2022, Angel Bumpus is released out on bond pending a retrial. About a year later, August 8th of 2023, Judge Amanda Dunn, who now has all of this in front of her, she dismisses the charges. And that dismissal comes after, weirdly, Angel Bumpus is administered 2 polygraph examinations. The defense does one, the prosecution does one. Now, keep in mind, that's not normally permissible or admissible in any kind of situation with a court of law. But in this instance, in fact, in both of these instances, both polygraph examiners or polygraphers stated that in summary, Angel Bumpus showed no deception when she denied any involvement or knowledge of the crime.
Right. And for a little bit more information about that, sort of in the meantime, between her conviction and being exonerated, a new Tennessee Attorney General was elected. She had several first. I'm not sure if she was the first youngest female or what, but she was a young woman who was shaking things up, right? That's right. What she sort of ran off of. And you're right about the polygraphs are never admissible. However, her new attorneys, after they had secured the conviction being overturned, and she was awaiting a new trial, she was out on $100,000 bond. It was her attorney's idea to have her take a polygraph because he very much believed in her. And honestly, I saw her being talked to about this and everything. And I very much believe that she had nothing to do with this. Her first attorney asked her, she said, because she showed her pictures of the crime scene. And she said, if I put you under oath, can you say that you've never seen this place? And she's like, I've never seen that place. And then so it was a very sort of innocent, I have nothing to do with this, right? And I believed it. And also, she really wanted to testify in the first trial, and she wasn't allowed. Or she was
talked out of it.
She was talking. I was going to say, it wasn't that she wasn't allowed to. It was just her attorneys felt like they were in a good position, and they weren't completely sure how she would hold up on the stand under cross, right?
Yeah.
I think that was a mistake, but they don't even mention it in the judge's order for a new trial, right?
Right.
So whatever. However, when I was trying to see, I can't remember what that district attorney's name.
Cody
I'm
Womp.
sorry.
I think that's who you're thinking of. Cody Womp.
Who?
Cody
Womp.
Yeah.
Yes, that's who it is.
She's the new. I think they call them solicitors general or attorneys general in that area, but she's the new whatever the name of the Hamilton County District Attorney General or something like that is her name. It's her title, and it's Cody Wamp, COTYWAMP, I believe.
Okay, and so she comes aboard, and the Angels' new defense attorneys, they say, hey, we believe you. How about if you take a lie detector, right?
Right.
And I would say she was a little bit concerned because she said, well, I'm super anxious. What if that affects it? I think it was more of I don't want to make this worse because it's almost like if you pass a polygraph, that's really great. But if it comes back inconclusive, you've just dug your hole deeper, right? And I get that. But see, her attorney was really confident. So he goes, after she's passed the first polygraph, he goes and talks to Cody Womp, who has recently been elected. And she is not as enthusiastic about this past polygraph because they used it as a negotiation, as leverage in a possible plea negotiation.
Right.
Or like ultimately they really wanted her to realize how ridiculous the whole case was and dismiss the charges, right?
Right.
And so they presented it to her and she said, fine, but I want her to take another one. And like, I'm going to pick the person, or I want it done by law enforcement, or whatever whatever the requirements that she had were for it. And they did that, and she passed that test too, just like you said. And then, so I feel like that's highly credible, right?
Oh, yeah.
There was so from both sides of the fence, they said she took this polygraph and she passed. And she was asked very blunt questions like, did you put the masking tape over the victim's face? Were you at the victim's house at the time he was killed? And she was honest and said, no, I wasn't there. I have nothing to do with this. And so they call in for a status update on the case. And I don't know if it was the judge or the prosecutor who said, I want all the parties to be present. And so everybody comes in and she gives sort of a long talk when she's presenting her side. And she says that, I kind of disagree with it, but she said she felt like Angel was at the scene of the crime when it happened. And that the evidence indicated that. However, she, without question, did not believe that Angel did anything by herself. And therefore, retrying her would not be justice for the victim. And they want to find the people who are actually responsible for it. And she was therefore dismissing the charges without prejudice.
Well, I mean, to me, that's the right move. Get rid of the charges, because this 13-year-old girl did not commit this gruesome homicide against a fully grown man.
I honestly was so surprised that she was charged, but the TBI was involved in this.
Anytime the TBI gets involved in anything, I have to kind of look at it with like an extra big grain of salt. And it's just been that way over the years. Look, anytime the TBI is involved in anything, like, I don't want to say they're all bad, because that's not true. But like, as an organization, they have had a number of problematic periods over the years. And this period of time where the investigation would have taken place initially, where it's being looked at, is a 10 or 12 year period that it was particularly problematic for the TBI.
I would agree with that. I feel like though the charges being brought, the fingerprint matching, I feel like there were a lot of places along the way here that could have put a stop to this.
I mean, I cannot believe anyone looked at this homicide and went, "Yep, it's definitely that 13-year-old girl."
Well, right, but they did,
Yep.
and then like it went. She was charged. She was indicted. She had a jury trial, and a jury found her guilty, which was just insane to me. Because what are they thinking? But that goes back to like what I think is sort of the natural starting point in any criminal prosecution. I think most of the time when a jury comes in and is seated for a trial, like a murder trial or a felony murder trial, they believe that the state would not have charged this person if they had not done it.
Yeah.
And that is, not a presumption of innocence. That's the only way I could figure out why on earth she was an adult at the time she was convicted, but that everybody was going along with this narrative. And it was horrifying to me because she was 100% innocent. The fact that the judge didn't say, well, I realize you guys have convicted her, but that's stupid. Her fingerprints were on the duct tape. That is, it's pretty damning, except like there is absolutely nothing else, right?
Right.
There was nothing else tying her to any of it. And she was 13 at the time. So, I disagreed that that Cody Womp said, I believe she was there and whatever she said. But at the same time, she is listed on the National Database for Exonerations. And in my opinion, she was exonerated. And to my knowledge, nobody else has ever been charged with this.
Yeah, the only thing I could think was maybe there's some kind of inside baseball we're missing where they think one of her brothers is involved and maybe had used her as a lookout or something and she was holding the duct tape. I did not come across anything that indicates that is based on any kind of facts whatsoever. But that phone call was the only thing I could think of where maybe that's why they're holding on to her somehow being involved. I will just go ahead and say, I don't think she's involved. I think that mistakes have been made. And like, even that phone call to me is more like a brother saying, dude, you took that duct tape from our house and this is what happened.
Oh yeah. There was some sort of inkling there, but like, to me, the point, so if you narrow it down and you're not just looking at like anything it could possibly mean, and you look at it in the context of, Angel Bumpus is on trial for this murder, they're saying like, well, she didn't do it. And they have some sort of information, whatever it is.
Right. Or they just have a gut feeling that that's more of their alley than it is hers.
Right. Or they could just know who it is and know it's not her, right?
Correct.
It's possible. But she was still in this position. She was taken away from her children for 3 years. And she had to serve that time. She was going to jail. She was going to be in jail for the rest of her life, basically. And, fortunately, there were enough people with enough legal finesse to figure it out.
Yeah.
But it's very alarming. And the fact, I feel like if anybody in her family was involved in it, that would have been the time to actually step up and say something.
But you can't snitch. You can't even snitch in this instance.
Well, I realize that, that is code or whatever, but like, you're really going to let her take the fall for this? Because I feel like that if her family was at all involved, right? I don't even know that's for sure. I feel like it's entirely possible the duct tape really got there from her grandfather doing a job over there and he just left it. and like none of them had anything to do with it. I don't know, but she ended up being the person charged with it, along with a complete stranger who was acquitted.
Yeah. And so, we end up here asking the questions that we always ask. And so I get cold cases and old cases. That cold cases meaning nobody's really investigating them. Old cases meaning they have a lot of pieces of the puzzle and they've never actually connected the dots and made an arrest. But when I look at these cases that pop in and like I end up with a big thick file of stuff that like I have to go through and figure out that's 10 years old or 15 years old or 20 years old or whatever. I always have the question in the back of my mind, like, is this like good police work, or is this like somebody trying to make a name for themselves, or they got some pressure and they're really trying to close this thing? Because those cases I think can be the most disastrous. This case is a little bit extreme with a 13-year-old girl being accused of felony murder like this. We should be questioning all these things. We should be questioning how this all happens. If nothing else, from the perspective of we don't want to make mistakes just trying to like close a file where we put people in prison that had nothing to do with something. And I personally think she has nothing to do with this.
I 100% agree with that. And she can't give them any information she doesn't have.
Right.
She cannot talk about a crime that she was not present for.
Right.
And so she's literally just in a rock and a hard place, because she could speculate, but that's not her job.
Correct.
Right?
That's 100% correct.
And this is one of the worst injustices that I've ever seen, both for the victim's family and for the wrongfully accused and convicted defendant, who was Angel Bumpus. Now, she has been, I think, the charges were dismissed. So
Correct.
I feel like she was exonerated. I don't know how much weight the prosecutor's statement in court holds, as far as saying, I believe she was there, but I don't believe we have enough evidence to convict her of this crime, or whatever she said, right?
Yeah.
I didn't appreciate that extra little nugget of information. I felt like she put it in there just to not look like she was a pushover or something. I don't know. It just was it didn't stick with me, because I was like, you should have just said, this has been, mistakes have been made here.
Yeah.
And left it at that. But I do think that in the sense that Angel Bumpus was finally no longer in prison, I guess the system worked.
Yeah. I don't have a lot more on this case. This is a rabbit hole you can go down. There's other stuff on the people involved here. One of the lead investigators that was ultimately in charge of this case, a guy named Carl Fields, he got fired from the Chattanooga Police Department. There's all kinds of stuff about him that you can go and read. He ends up being, at one point, accused of coaching witnesses to lie. He is accused of sexually harassing a couple of women, tampering with some evidence. He faces some criminal charges, but some of those were dismissed. The people surrounding this case and the media surrounding this case is almost as interesting as how absurd this case is itself. The main question for me had always been, like, how do we get this 13-year-old girl and charge her with felony murder? I don't have an answer for you, except like there is a rabbit hole to go down that if you really want to watch some media, I think she's on Guilty or Innocent, which is an A&E program. I know that other podcast YouTubers and TikTokers have covered this. So it's a fun one to go down in terms of it ends correctly.
It also provides sort of one of those like tipping scale types of things that we bring up. Like, when do you know that the DNA is relevant? And that, like, when do you know that the fingerprints are relevant, right?
Yeah.
And how essentially that was the only thing they had was a fingerprint match.
Right. That's that and the like proximity of being, relatively close, 2 miles away or whatever, and the connection between Grandma and Franklin Bonner. So,
right.
But there's not a lot to all of that when you consider this is a tiny 13-year-old girl. And she really is tiny, 5 feet, 80, 85 pounds. She's little and not known for any kind of deviousness at the time. I encourage anybody to read up on her story. And I would say that one of the most important parts of this case is that it seems to have righted itself. I don't know that we're going to learn a whole lot from it in terms of as a society. And jurors can really only do what they're presented by prosecutors. And it is an adversarial system. It's meant to be adversarial for a reason, but sometimes the absurdity of it all just confuses me. Nicholas Cheaton is a great rabbit hole to go down here. He has been indicted on a lot of different stuff, and I think he'll have a couple of trials coming up if he doesn't plead some of that out or it doesn't get dismissed. In my opinion, him saying it's Mallory Vaughn makes him a real good candidate for maybe having his fingers in it.
Well, I would love to know that they thoroughly explored that option and have somehow ruled him out. I kind of doubt it, though.
I think I read he was maybe in prison around the time or something.
And that's what I was wondering, right? Is do they have a reason to believe he couldn't have possibly been responsible for it? Because I'm sure, as most good detectives would, you would always want to make sure that your informant is not simply pawning off one of their own crimes onto some unsuspecting former cellmate or whatever, right?
Yeah, I tracked him a little bit, but it was going to be a deeper dive than I cared to do on him. He's definitely been in federal custody here and there. And anytime that happens, that somebody is in both state and federal custody at different points in time, means they've also been in jails and halfway houses. It's difficult to track their whereabouts, and so I was not able to come to any kind of conclusion on him. But he's another interesting rabbit hole in terms of the cases that he has found himself in. I just was curious about this 13-year-old girl, and here we are. I know it's a longer episode, but I did want to get her story out there. Originally, I was going to throw this in to the holiday stuff, but we went with a different theme. And that's a whole different thing that'll be coming out. So it didn't fit this year. Otherwise, if it had just been a straight up exoneration, and we were doing exonerations, that it might have been a part of it. Someone messaged me. Do you have anything else on angels?
No, I don't.
Okay. So someone had messaged me some questions, and I'm going to address those, but I wanted, if you're going to have anything else, I wanted you to be able to do that.
No, all I was going to say is that if the victim's killers ever brought, we might circle back around. But other than that, this is a full circle situation, right? Yeah,
I think so. That's a good point. And it brings up something I didn't say out loud that I probably should. Just so you guys are aware, one of the other things that happens in these cases that are cold cases and old cases, particularly old cold cases, when you bring someone, convict them, and you sentence them to life without parole, really, and a prosecutor makes a comment like Cody Womp did that Meg mentioned earlier, it doesn't really matter if you find the right killer, because unfortunately, Cody Womp, the real reason that statement was such an error is she has provided reasonable doubt for every potential future defendant in this case, because she believes that Angel Bumpus was involved. And as long as that's hanging out there, unless the person happens to be directly related to Angel Bumpus in some way, which usually, in my experience, it's not. The prosecutor was just wrong all along. The investigator was just wrong all along. It's something completely wacky, which we saw with the yogurt shop murders this year. And that's the reason that it was actually unadjudicated for so long, is because the dots weren't connected, and it happened to really be random or really be a customer of Franklin Bonner's who wanted more weed than he had, and there was that roll of duct tape's really just random. It's just laying at the scene.
Right, but that would make me think that none of them were involved, right?
Correct. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And so you've provided, by going through this prosecution, which is, regardless of the conviction, it's been overturned, and it's kind of a weak case. You've provided reasonable doubt for all future potential defendants in this matter. So ultimately, you close the case whether you wanted to or not.
That is correct.
Yeah. There was one thing somebody had asked me about why we're not on Sirius XM right now, and I do not know the answer to that question. I apologize, Rain. I will try and get an answer to that. I looked it up as soon as that message came in, and I do not know why it happened. I had been talking to someone at Sirius XM about doing something different, and I like that conversation stopped a while ago. What I can say is it used to be our Stitcher stuff ran through there. And I know Stitcher ceased operations a while ago, and that was all absorbed into Sirius. So it could be they discontinued something in the feed that I just have to go push a button on. I don't think I did anything to undo it, but I apologize. We should still be available most everywhere else that you get your podcast, but for some reason, we are currently not on that particular platform, and I apologize that that has happened, and I'll try and get it rectified definitely before the holiday stuff.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrottieCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.